let's explore an angle that I haven't heard anyone talk about yet. So let's take a look at that. For that, obviously, we have to begin with the map so that we can orient ourselves. Where is the map? Here's the map. So I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to go back in history and let's take a look at this place. This is the region that is the place where the conflict is happening, which is Ukraine, the Black Sea region, etc. This is the region. So if we look at the geography of Ukraine, we know that it's a very flat country. It's flat like a pancake. There are no rivers. I mean, there are rivers. There are no valleys. There are no mountains, no hills. It's very flat. That's the kind of land it is. And this nation is dominated by a number of rivers. The most important river is obviously the Dnieper River, and then there is another river called the Dniester, which also flows through Ukraine. If you go deep over here, this is the Dniester. So this is a nation of many rivers. Two of the major rivers are the Dnieper and the Dniester. Now, the Dnieper used to be called the Danu Apara. It was a Scythian Shaka word, Danu. The ancient Scythian word for water was Danu. It is derived from the name of the Rigvedic goddess Danu. Uh, so the river Dniester, the river Dnieper, derives its name from Danu Apara, which means the lower Danu, and the Dniester was called the Danu Astara, which means the lowest, the southernmost Danu. So that's how the names Dnieper and Dniester originated. And obviously, if you have heard me speak about this before, there are lots of river names in Europe which are all named after the ancient Rigvedic goddess Danu: the Don, the Danube, the Donets, the Dunayek, the Dugava, and many other rivers. Now, why are we talking about rivers? So let's go to the western part of Ukraine. There is this little nation here called Moldova. So the river Dniester passes through Moldova. And so here it is, the river Dniester. And this region, a long time ago, after the Scythian days, but during the Roman times, was called Dacia, Dacia, Dacia. Now, this. So let's go back into history and let's talk about the 1990s. In the early 1990s, around 1990, 91, around that time, the Soviet Union began to disintegrate. Various Soviet socialist republics, especially the Central Asian republics, etc., and even Moldova and the Baltic republics like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they started declaring their independence. This is in the 1990s. So Moldova, excuse me, Moldova also declared its independence. Now, what happened is that the western region of Moldova, this region which is to the eastern region of Moldova, the region that is to the east of the river Dniester, this region is not entirely the ethnic groups that live in this region are not all Moldovans. It's about 30% Russians, 23% Ukrainians, and about 28% Moldovans. There are Bulgarians, there are Belarusians, and other people also. So this is not dominated by the Moldovan ethnic group. So what happened in around 1990, I think it was in September 1990, that this region said that they want to remain either remain with USSR or Russia, or they want their own separate Soviet Socialist Republic. They called it the Pridnestrovian Moldavian Soviet Socialist Republic, and they wanted this republic to be separate from Moldova. This is something that happened in late 1990. Now, the great Gandhi of the USSR, Mr. Gorbachev, he opposed this. If you look at the late history of the USSR and the early history of the post-USSR Russia, you have two very central figures. One is Mr. Gorbachev, and one is Mr. Yeltsin. So Gorbachev was the Gandhi of the region, and Yeltsin was the Nehru of the region because he presided over the complete destruction of the Russian economy. So when these guys in this region declared an independent Pridnestrovian Moldavian Soviet Socialist Republic, separate from Moldavia. Gorbachev opposed this, but he was no longer in a position of great power. So his opposition was verbal and moral and all that. And then there was a war. It is called the Transnistria War of around 1990 to 92. So this, so when Moldavia, when Moldova declared independence, they did not really have an armed force of their own. They did not have an army. They had to set around creating their own army from scratch. Whereas the USSR did have an army, and the sentiments, I mean, the army of the USSR, whatever was left of it over here, was in favor of the independence movement of the Pridnestrovian Moldavian Soviet Socialist Republic. So they kind of supported the separatists who were trying to separate from Moldova. And then there was this war that happened for a couple of years. And then there was a ceasefire. And this region on the left bank of the river Dniester is now a post-Soviet frozen conflict zone. It is not administered by the nation of Moldova. That's what happened, and that's the situation that still exists today. So there is a peacekeeping force in this region. So first of all, if you want to, you may ask me, what do I mean by the left bank of a river? So let's do a thought experiment. Think of your favorite river, whichever it is. It's an Indian river, foreign river, whatever it is, and do a thought experiment. Imagine you are magically transported on into the middle of the river, and you are floating over the middle of the river, and you are facing the downstream part of the river, which means to your back is where the water originates from, and your face is facing towards the direction in which the water is flowing. So if you are in this position, then your left hand points towards the left bank of the river by convention, and your right hand points towards the right bank of the river. So that's what we mean by the left bank and right bank of a river. So in the case of the Dniester, the river, the water flows from north to south. It drains into the Black Sea. So the left bank of the Dniester is this region called Transnistria. Let's put that on. Yeah, here it is. So this region is called the Transnistria region. You can see the shaded region, which is, well, not administered by Moldova. That is Transnistria. Excuse me. So that's what it is. And this is the course of the river Dniester, which passes through Moldova as well as Ukraine. So this region is a post-Soviet frozen conflict zone. It is not recognized by any major nation, but it is recognized by the nations, well, the other breakaway nations such as Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh. If you want to know where these are, so Abkhazia is this region here. This is the nation of Georgia. And you can see there's a dashed line over here. So that is the breakaway Republic of Abkhazia in northwestern Georgia. There is a South Ossetia also, which is this dashed region over here, which is more or less administered by Russia. Both of these are proxies of Russia, you could say. And also Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh, which is administered by Azerbaijan and historically been part of Armenia. So these three nations or unrecognized nations recognize Transnistria as an independent nation. So after the war got over in 1992, the Russians sent a peacekeeping force of soldiers to keep the peace in this region. And Russia has continued to provide military and political and economic support to Transnistria. There are approximately 2,000 Russian troops stationed in Transnistria. They are designated as peacekeepers. Now, why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about Transnistria, this small, obscure, long forgotten region? Well, let's take a look. Let's zoom deeper into the map. So the capital of Transnistria is this city here, Tiraspol. Now, let's zoom deeper into the map, and we find this little village in Transnistria. It's on the border with Ukraine. It's called Kubasna. What is Kobasna? So let's put the satellite image on instead of the map. Let's zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Let's zoom into this little village called Kobasna. What do we have here? What do we have? We have a church, what looks like a church, and we have a school and kindergarten. But that's not remarkable. What's interesting is this thing here. So this thing here, let's zoom in. You can see these low, flat buildings, very well spaced. This is a military ammunition depot. It's called the Kobasna Ammunition Depot. It is the largest ammunition depot in Eastern Europe, or maybe one of the largest ammunition depots in the entirety of Europe. It contains roughly 20,000 tons of ammunition. Uh, so it's written over here, explosive inheritance. This is all Soviet era ammunition. So the breakaway. So this is an article about that. Now, what's interesting is the quantity, about 20,000 tons. It says that a study by the Moldovan Academy of Sciences has warned that the impact of an explosion of the depot would be equivalent to the atomic bombs from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, they are saying that the expiration dates of the weapons have come and gone and all that. But understand something. Just because some ammunition's expiry date is gone doesn't mean that it's not useful. There were battles during the First World War in Europe, in certain parts of Europe, in certain parts of France, and a lot of ammunition was expended over there. There are lots of unexploded shells that litter the place. Even today, those are no-go zones for civilians, because those shells, that ammunition, can still explode. The Americans bombed millions, hundreds of thousands of tons of ammunition into Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam during the Vietnam conflict in the 1960s, 70s. Yes. And even today, and they laid, I don't know how many, maybe thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of mines all over the place. Even today, people get maimed and killed because of those mines that are still hidden there, and they explode randomly because no one knows where they are. So if ammunition's expiry date is gone, it doesn't mean it's not useful. Okay, maybe it won't work at 100% efficacy, or say 95% efficacy. Maybe only 85% of the ammunition will work, maybe only 80% will work, maybe only 75%. It doesn't matter. It's still three-fourths of the shells that will explode. So we have an enormous depot of ammunition in Kobasna, which is guarded by Russian soldiers. At least 1,500 soldiers are guarding this ammunition depot in Transnistria. It contains enough ammunition to be, if it explodes, it's the equivalent of the atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that's an interesting situation there. So there is this operational group of the Russian forces that is currently acting as a peacekeeping force there, but it's actually guarding, it's guarding the ammunition depot. Now Transnistria it has been pro-Russian for the longest time. The first president was this fine gentleman whose name is Igor Smirnov. And it is said that, let's take a look at this tweet. The former military inspectorate of the Ministry of Defense of Moldova has said that the armed forces of Transnistria have rigged all arms depots within the breakaway region, including the Kobasna ammunition depot, with explosives. So if any military operations begin, it will cause catastrophic damage to parts of Moldova, Transnistria, and Ukraine. So this ammunition, all of it, this depot has been rigged with explosives. If anyone tries to take it, it will be blown up, and the explosion will be equivalent to the atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So NATO is in no position to take this. If they try to take it, it will be blown up. And as we know, Transnistria is very much pro-Russian. This is a lady who was the foreign minister of Transnistria about a decade or so ago. She is also married to the second president of Transnistria. So it's very clear that they have always been with Russia. So yeah, this is another news report which says that it will resemble Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's the amount of ammunition that this depot contains. And this is something that happened recently. I mean, this happened in April last year, almost a year ago. Drones seen and shots fired near the huge ammunition depot. So apparently, it looks like Ukrainian drones were trying to do reconnaissance operations in this region, the Kobasna ammunition depot. So there is a lot of interest, but it's not being publicized. So NATO is wondering how it can get its hands on this ammunition depot, how it can, uh, you know, eliminate the Russian presence from Transnistria and bring Transnistria back into the Moldovan fold, and how to get their hands on this enormous ammunition depot. But clearly, it is very clear that the ammunition depot is rigged with explosives, and no NATO forces will be allowed anywhere near it without blowing the thing up. So that is the thing. Now, let's take a look at the geography, the border. It's right next to the border. It's less than a kilometer from the border with Ukraine. Yeah. And this is the overall geography. Now, as we know, during the Ukraine conflict, which is still ongoing, and it's right now, it's kind of it's not very hot. Obviously, the Bakhmut operation is going on. The Ukrainian forces are encircled there. They have been given a line of retreat, so they will be permitted to retreat for now. So Russia has taken over about a quarter of the nation of Ukraine, the Luhansk, Donetsk regions, uh, the eastern and southern parts of Ukraine. Now, everyone is saying a spring offensive is coming. I was saying a winter offensive would come. Lots of people are saying that also. But thus far, the Russians have been very calm. They have not taken any initiative to start an offensive, but it could come. A spring offensive could come. So, considering the Russian presence in Transnistria, the Russian presence in Transnistria is, imagine as if India were to have an armed presence in Balochistan or in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Pashtunistan, and that region would not be in Pakistan's hands. It would not be recognized as part of Pakistan by the people who administer that. That's the kind of achievement Russia. That's the kind of situation the Russians have achieved. So that's what happens when you have significant amounts of economic, military, and geopolitical power. When your geopolitical zone of influence is very large. So I would imagine that whenever in the future the Russian offensive begins again, I would imagine that the Russians would want to take all the coastal regions of Ukraine. This is all speculation. They've already taken Crimea, as we know. They've taken the Donbass region, a significant part of the Donbass region. Now, Odessa is a port that the USSR developed. There have been, they will definitely want to retake the port, the city of Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Odessa. So eventually, I would imagine they would like to take the entire coastal part of Ukraine and establish contact once again with Transnistria, at which time they could choose to reincorporate Transnistria into Russia. So that is what could possibly be the long term game plan of Russia. Not next week, not next month, maybe not this year. It looks like this is going to be a slow burning conflict, the Ukraine conflict. That's what it looks like right now. Obviously, we could be wrong. We don't know what Mr. Putin and his military planners are thinking. But eventually, I would imagine, considering the pro-Russian sentiment, very strong pro-Russian sentiment in Transnistria, and the presence of Russian troops who are acting as peacekeepers, and the presence of the enormous ammunition depot in the Kobasna village, I would imagine that the long-term game plan eventually would be to re-establish Russian contact geographically with Transnistria. And they have a trump card in their hands. Nobody is in a position to take the city of the town of Kobasna, the village of Kobasna, and take the ammunition depot because it is rigged with explosives. So if worst comes to worst, they will blow up the ammunition depot, which would be a complete catastrophe for everybody involved, especially for civilians. So they will use it only as something of last resort. They will not do it otherwise. But they have a nuclear option that very few people know about. The Russians, they can set off the equivalent of a nuclear explosion without resorting to nuclear weapons. That's what Russia has there in Transnistria. So I would imagine that whenever the offensive comes, if it does come, eventually the long term game plan would be for Russia to reintegrate Transnistria and to take the Ukraine's Black Sea coastal regions. Obviously, they may also want to take Kiev and do a regime change and all that. But this is something that is very interesting. So they have created this breakaway nation over here in Moldova. They also have the breakaway nation of South Ossetia and obviously Abkhazia in northern Georgia. So these are all unfinished agendas of the post-Soviet breakup era, and I think that the long-term game plan of Russia is to reintegrate these regions with Russia. Now, when they will do it is something we don't know, but eventually, I would imagine that's what the game plan is.